This is Kimberly Reuter, business advisor and supply chain expert, and welcome to The Morning Mood. Today, we have a great guest, Matt, who is going to share with us his personal history and his biggest lessons that he has learned and how he has applied it to his success. Now, Matt has an amazing story, and it's very unique. We don't normally get someone with his type of background on the show. So super excited to share it with you guys. So Matt, hi, welcome.
Morning, Kim. How are you?
Good. So tell us, so you and I met through Blue Spark. Blue Spark and I were working with a client together, and that's how I got introduced to you. And we had a chance to meet when we were at TPM out in LA. That's our first time that we met, right?
That was, yep.
Yep.
It was
Yep.
great,
Yeah.
great to meet. Working through a mutual client. I think
Yeah.
this year, more than most, requires a special touch in the right type of situation.
It does. Okay, great. So tell us about your history. How did you get to Blue Spark? So in case anyone doesn't know what Blue Spark does, Blue Spark is a supply chain consulting company specializing in ocean freight, I believe, right?
Correct. Ocean freight, all things kind of international logistics, getting your containers from port of loading, port of discharge, all the way to the door.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so you're working in supply chain. And so tell us, how did you get where you are today? How did you even get into supply chain?
Yeah. So thanks for first having me on, Kim. I would say the one thing about the maritime industry is, from my perspective, it's very unknown to most folks in the USA, right? It's one of those things that kind of flies under the radar, and folks don't even realize that there's a giant complex industry that moves their goods around the world. And most of the things that they have on their shelves has probably spent more miles at sea than they have. So it's really interesting to be in this space. But I did get started about, I'd say 15 years ago. I attended the United States Merchant Marine Academy, which is
Right.
one. Yep.
Yeah. Tell us more about that, because this is really interesting, because I didn't know a lot about the Merchant Marine Academy. So tell us more about the Merchant Marine Academy.
Yeah, so the Merchant Marine Academy is actually one of the 5 federal service academies. So you can think of it as the exact same kind of process to get in, like Army, Navy, Air Force. There's 2 others, right? There's the Coast Guard Academy and the Merchant Marine Academy. So had to get a senator or congressman's nomination, get a certain number on my SAT or ACT scores, pass a physical fitness test. So once I was at school, it is a military school, so we had to do freshman orientation, and it's a very rigorous curriculum, right? You have to do about 180 credits in 3 years, when most colleges are 120 in 4.
Yep.
So very rigorous there, but it does open up a lot of doors. So 1 year I spent entirely at sea, actually learning the trade. So I was able to on container ships, travel the world, get paid while doing so, work on tankers, different government vessels. And it really just opens up a lot of doors after graduation. You can actually, I'd say about 30 to 40% of the graduating class goes active duty military, and they can go in any 5 branches. So if you want to go fly for the Army, and you can go into the Marine Corps, whatever you want to do. And then the rest actually work in the maritime industry, whether afloat and ashore. And because college was paid for by the taxpayers, right, there is an obligation afterwards, which is either sailing for 6 years on your license or working active duty. And if you do go and sail on your license or work in some capacity in the maritime industry, you also have to spend 8 years in the Navy Reserve, supporting and providing that maritime expertise to the Navy. It's very much tied to military sea lift command, just getting the liaison or expertise of actually working afloat and passing that on.
Yeah. Fascinating. I did not know that the Merchant Marine Academy was the equivalent of West Point and the Naval Academy. So, and not a lot of people as are not aware of the maritime industry. I myself fell into it. We have a company in common, T. Parker Host. I started my career down in Norfolk, Virginia, working for T. Parker Host, which was actually a steamship husbandry company. And what they do is send out steamship agents to get the pilots and the boats into berth and handle all the medical and food and all these kinds of things that need to be happening when a ship comes after being 30 days at sea. They need stuff when they arrive. So, and you worked with some of the T. Parker agents too along the way, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So after graduation, I actually worked in the maritime industry. So I sailed on my license for, I'd say, almost 10 years. And I
Wow.
worked worked my way up to a chief mate. So you could think of chief mate as second in command, and they're really in charge of the day-to-day operations of the vessel. When you go into port, you can think of all those intricate moves of loading cargo, stowage, making sure that stability is right, working with ports and terminals, working with the ship's agents. All of that kind of falls on the responsibility of the chief mate. So, built for tanker companies, a few container ship companies, some government-owned companies as well, all U.S. flagged. So we can consider that the Jones Act.
Yep.
I did that for about 10 years. Yeah. So that's how our paths crossed there, especially with T. Parker Host. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of the services that folks would need, like you said, it really goes unnoticed, and folks don't really realize that there's so many steps and people involved with
Yeah.
actually getting the around the world.
It's crazy. So I do want to do a deeper session with you in a future date, because it is super fascinating what actually goes into actually getting something on a ship, right? And just how our cargo moves around the world. Like, people have this perception that a ship just like rocks up to a pier and like unloads and puts some other containers on, and then it takes off. It takes days to unload a vessel. It takes days to plan a vessel. Just the things that, like you said, like loading the vessel, the weights, where it has to go, not front loaded, not back loaded. There is a very intricate operation that goes into managing a ship. And we don't know, and most people don't even know that it happens. At most, we get people who know it came off a truck, right, before it got to the shelf. But the ship that it went on. So I do want to have you back so we can do a really deep conversation about that, because it's super fascinating. Just about even how they move to the ports, right? Like, there's pilots involved. You can't just pull up to a berth. You have to have license and training and all of these things that people don't even recognize. So I'm excited to have you back to talk about that. So all of this great experience, you were actually, and if you guys haven't noticed yet, I want to call it out. My guests are the doers. These are the people with the dirt under their nails, with the worn out shoes, who have been out there actually doing it. And Matt has an amazing story about how he was actually doing it, running the ship. So wonderful perspective. So this is what got you here, now working for Blue Spark, specializing in ocean freight management. So out of all of this, you must have surely had some lessons, right? You've learned a thing or two, hopefully. So what has been the biggest lesson you've learned to date?
Yeah. So I would say, really it's come from my time in consulting. So after my sailing career, right, I went back to school, went to New York Maritime, got my master's degree in international shipping and business. And then actually I was brought on to PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, to manage their North America logistics and maritime component. There wasn't a huge, say, vertical at that point in time, but it was right during COVID. So you can think of all the different issues with detention, demurrage, ports and terminals. So really was able to provide that subject matter expertise and say, here is exactly what happens, and here you should do it. But I had to back to the biggest lesson I've learned is, I would say, clarity wins in complexity.
Oh my God, that is so good. Please say that again.
Clarity wins in complexity.
Oh, that is music to my ears. So tell us about what that means.
Yeah. So I think, especially now, we can think of everyone wanting to have actionable data, and data tells us a story. We want to have giant PowerPoint presentations. We want to, have all of this information in front of us, when in reality, a lot of folks in this are just looking for, hey, what is your recommendation? What should I go do right now? And maybe what are the levers I can pull, whether it be value or cost savings or efficiencies, then I can go tackle right now. So rather than maybe touching around the subject and just circling it, really just say, here's what we need to go do. Let's focus on that. And let's not make supply chain or logistics more complex than it already is.
Right. So let's just go back a little bit to what you were saying about data, right? And that everybody wants big PowerPoint presentation, or let me just back up. They think they want all these things, right? Because they've been told that the bigger, the thicker the packet, the better it is, right? Bigger is always better. And so we see that out a lot out there in just massive amounts of data, cut and pasted a million different ways with lots of different pretty colors. But it's often hard to understand the actual message, right?
That's correct. Yep. I would say data is a good thing,
Yeah.
but you really have to understand, when I get this data, what is the story I'm looking for, or what do I want it to tell me?
Yeah.
And then get it from that perspective rather than just compiling a whole bunch and just having it in front of you. Right.
Yeah.
And in any sense, if you can't really understand or make a decision when you don't have the kind of the right context or experience to make this.
Absolutely. And my personal experience and professional experience has been that when I really find an expert, somebody who really knows what they're doing, they speak very simply. Like it's like three sentences or less. I think that's always been my rule is that if you can't answer a question in three sentences or less, you probably really don't understand the answer and or the question. And so what I bump into and where I see this and probably where you see this a lot too is that when I'm speaking to someone, I ask a question and I get this really verbose answer that goes on and on. I'm normally very suspicious of that, right? I'm like, there's something in there that they're not telling me because they're hiding something with words. So the clarity wins over complexity is such a massive lesson. Like, how did you learn that? Like, how did it happen?
Yeah. So I would tell you that I have learned that the hard way, right? And, when I started out in my career, having this, say, niche expertise that not a lot of folks had, right? You kind of want to lay it all out there and maybe educate some folks on what the happenings are. But really, it's when the room gets noisy and everything starts going haywire and we're looking at data and charts and people are asking questions. Person who stands up and says, here's what actually matters. Here's what we can go do.
Yeah.
You know, you become the most valuable person on the team.
You do. Because I think also what comes along when you have clarity over complexity is you also have solutions. I think a lot of times when people over complexify something, it's because they don't have an answer and they'd rather admire the problem than actually come up with an actual solution. So that's a really good call out too. That clarity also leads to having great solution. All right, so this is a great lesson. It's been really interesting to me. I have not had the same lesson twice yet. I've been doing these interviews for a while now, and every single person comes with a new one. So this is great. Well, how would you say that you have actually applied this to your success?
Yeah. So thinking about the complex logistical issues that we have currently in the market, right? It's one thing to have a solution or something in plan or in place, but also at the same time, I think in order to be a good steward and a trusted advisor, you have to be able to tell your client or anyone, hey, I do not know the answer to this. And that's okay. You don't have to make something up just because you have to have an answer. It's okay because there's so many different variables that happen. Am I going to know what happens tomorrow with the tariffs? Like the tariffs going to go up? Are they going to go down? I don't know. And those things are above our control. So let's control what we can. Let's
Yes.
pull the within our organization that we can control. And those external factors, let's plan for them and have kind of risk mitigation involved. But at the same time, some of those you won't be able to handle and you just kind of have to roll with it and be flexible.
Yeah. You touched on another really great it's actually a leadership principle for me or a leadership value for me, but you just talked on it and I was just counseling someone a few months ago about this, a young leader, a manager coming up in the world who struggled and he did exactly what we've been talking about. When he didn't know an answer to something, he would just get really wordy, like just go like verbal diarrhea, like it was bad. And it was his tell. I figured out that when he would do that, he didn't actually know what he was talking about and he was trying to hide it because he felt like in order to be a leader and to grow, he needed to know everything. He really felt like that's how you became a leader. And you just touched on that and that being a great leader is not knowing. Being able to say, I don't know, actually makes you a more valuable leader. And I encourage people to do it more often.
Yep. And that trait takes time. It's not like you're going to
Okay.
learn that overnight. You're going to fail. You're going to get back up and you're going to, try again. And just having that mind frame to say, hey, we can get to this answer. Let's figure it out. And leaning on folks who might have more expertise than you. Makes sense. Say the logistics industry, so fascinating for me is you have to rely on other people and other organizations to actually move the freight.
Yes.
And how do you manage those relationships? How do you judge who's going to be best in your court?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, logistics. I would say if I sat back and really looked at it in logistics, if I looked at one container move, you're working with not really even including the vendor, the person you're buying it from. You're working with probably what, 8 different partners? Freight
And
forwarder, a broker, a trucker, a steamship line, the piers, the stevedores, everything. It's probably close to 8 different partners. I haven't actually ever sat down and counted it. I think I'm going to do that now and actually count how many different people or organizations, partners that you work with to move a single container? And I'm going to say it's probably more than 8.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
banks, the
Oh my God.
underwriters.
We'll get into finances. Jeez, you're right. Yeah. We didn't even start to talk about finances. Right. So I think this is super interesting because this is not something I've actually thought about. And that supply chain really is a network. Yeah. It's all about relationships.
It is.
It really is. And that's another thing. We came together through a relationship, through a vendor who had a great relationship with you guys, had a great relationship with us, and we were able to partner up to help out with that. So awesome lesson learned. Clarity over complexity. Clarity wins over complexity every time. An amazing life lesson. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
No, just, really thank you for your time, and I'm happy to be on the show, and wishing you and your fan base the best there.
Awesome.
If there's anything from an ocean freight side that folks need, please feel free to reach out.
Oh, totally.
So talk about the industry and what matters, and global trade will not die. With all this happening, it's been around for thousands of years. It will find a way to overcome the current obstacles,
Yes.
and get things moving. So it's not a dead end here. It's just
No.
kind of that we have to do, and we'll get through it as an industry.
We've been trading since seashells. Okay. So trade is not going to stop. The first international trades we figured out were the different rocks and shells that didn't exist in our countries. Those are traded items. So we have been doing it for thousands of years. You're absolutely right. It is not going anywhere. But we do want to have you back. We want to have a deeper conversation about what actually goes into actually moving containers. And I'm going to sit down and count the partners, and hopefully you can too. And thank you, my audience, for being here and tuning in. I hope that you learned something from Matt today. And we will talk to you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.